If you're planning on taking the AWS Solutions Architect Associate exam, you don't want to miss out on these practice questions to help you review and prepare for taking the real AWS exam. Taking practice exam questions like these early on in your study phase can help you identify holes in your understanding of important topics that are covered in the AWS exams. Now, before we jump into the questions, I wanted to highlight a few tips on how to maybe approach these practice questions here and provide some background on how they actually came about. So I'm in the process of creating an AWS Solutions Architect Associate training course based on the requests that have come in from students that have taken the Cloud Practitioner course here on the channel and went on to pass the CCP exam. Now back to the AWS Solutions Architect practice exam questions. I figured I'd take a Amazonian approach to the Solutions Architect Associate training course I'm starting to build and use that famous working backwards approach that is used for developing all kinds of new products and services within Amazon. So with the end goal of having students pass the AWS exam with real-world knowledge and a lot of hands-on experience, the last step of that journey is really taking and passing the exam itself. I figured by building out some of these practice exams, I could take some of the question information and help refine the course lessons so students are really prepared for the types of questions they'll expect on the exam. Now, I've just launched these practice exams as a whole SAA practice exam simulator bundle that I'll continue to refine and build out over the next few weeks. There'll be multiple full practice exams in it. Some of them you can go through at your own pace, and some are actually timed to help simulate the time pressures of the real exam to ensure you build the skills on how to budget your time when actually taking the real one. I'll be building detailed answer feedback content into each of the exam questions to ensure you really understand why certain answers are correct, which ones are incorrect, and most importantly, you really have that understanding of why. I'll also have references to the AWS documentation sources so you can go through and do your own fact-checking and further review the information. Now, the practice questions in this video are sampled from one of the practice exams offered in the exam simulator bundle. If you like the questions sampled in this video here and you want the full exam simulator experience, definitely check out the practice exam bundle. It'll have the full pool of 65 exam questions along with what was sampled in this video. And you'll also have access to full other practice exams full of 65 questions each from completely new question pools, all for a couple dollars. At this moment in time, I'm still working on some of the question answer feedback content and getting additional full exam question pools ready. Now, because this is a bit of a work in progress currently, the bundle is available at a discounted price for a limited time. If you pick up the SAA practice exam bundle soon, you'll save some money and get access to all the new practice exams and updated answer feedback as soon as it's available. I'm expecting to have 3 or more full exam simulations along with all the answer feedback done sometime within January. So take advantage of the early bird pricing if you're after some high quality SAA practice exams to help with your overall study program. Practice exams are a great way to test your knowledge and really help you prepare for the Solutions Architect Associate exam. Now, with that out of the way, let's dive into some suggestions on how to approach these practice exam questions in the video here. So based on the feedback from my AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner exam question video I made earlier on the channel that students really liked, I'll be reading through the questions and then taking a bit of a pause to first let you see if you can answer the question first without even seeing the answer options. This stage would really be the ultimate level of preparedness and understanding where you can quickly understand the question scenario and solutions and potential answers already just flood into your mind that would address it almost instantly. Now, the answers you come up with in your head may not be an exact fit for the answer options that you'd be presented with, but right away you should be able to quickly identify the right answers or potentially rule out the incorrect ones. So after that initial pause after reading the question, I'll display and read through all the possible answers and pause again for a bit to give you time to answer the question itself. Now, if I go too fast, please just pause the video as you need to, or if I'm going too slow, use the speed settings in the video player to progress through the questions at a faster pace. Now, keep in mind that with the real exam, you'll have a limit of 130 minutes to complete it and answer 65 questions. So you have an average of 2 minutes per question. Your first time through the questions here in the video, pause as you need to so you can think through the questions and answers and do your own digging into the AWS documentation or other sources to find the answers. If you go through this video again later though, try to keep pace with answering the questions as I go through them, or at a minimum, ensure that you get used to having a 2-minute per question pace. Keep in mind that 2-minute pace is to read through the question, understand all the details of what is being asked there, and read through all the possible answers, and of course, finally decide on what the best answer or answers is. Some of the Solutions Architect Associate exam question scenarios and their answer options can be quite long. Often you'll spend over a minute just reading through the question itself, trying to quickly comprehend what it's asking, and then reading through the lengthy answer options as well. So you want to be sure as you go through the questions that you're trying to quickly comprehend what it's actually asking and picking out any of the details if it's asking for a solution that's perhaps the lowest cost or least effort type of scenarios. Now, if you get stumped on something in your first pass or two through these practice questions, be sure to take some notes on what you found confusing or any services that weren't familiar to you, and just focus on these areas as you continue preparing for the exam. Through the video, I'll pick some random questions that are perhaps interesting or have important details to watch out for, and I'll break those down and demonstrate some techniques that may help you take study notes and really paint a mental picture of what the exam question is asking. There's, of course, no one way to study, and everyone has different preferences and methods, but there are really some cool tools that I like using for helping taking notes, brainstorming some review options, and really just helping to visualize the question scenarios and help deepen my overall understanding. Now, if you're watching this video, you're likely aiming towards a cloud architect or cloud engineer career, and in these job roles, one of your many responsibilities will likely be to design and explain complex cloud architectures. So being familiar with tools that can help you quickly diagram solutions and collaborate with other team members to explain ideas becomes really important. Getting a lot of practice diagramming and explaining solutions will help you a lot through your exam study phase, helping you to really visualize different concepts, the best practices, and really how these different services interact. It will also help you prepare to quickly present these ideas in case you need to whiteboard solutions during interview scenarios, or when you're using tools to collaborate on solutions with a team or clients on a certain project. All right, so with all that out of the way, let's actually get into these practice exam questions. The first one I'll actually use as a bit of a demo just to recap the format I'll go through with these and provide some tips on how you can capture some notes and visualize the questions better as you go through them and help with the study review process. All right, so let's take a look at question number 1. A company has an e-commerce checkout cart workflow that writes the cart items to a database. The process then calls a service to complete the payment. The customers are experiencing timeouts during the checkout process, resulting in abandoned carts and increased customer support calls. When users click on the checkout button again due to the frustrating delay, multiple unique orders are created for the same single transaction that is intended. How should a solutions architect update this workflow to prevent the creation of multiple orders? Now, as you're going through the practice questions, especially if it's your first time through and maybe you don't completely understand the question scenario or the details or maybe even what the answer would be, I often find it helpful to just pause the video after the question, maybe copy the text down and reword it possibly, or often like to use diagramming tools to help kind of visually understand what the question might be asking. An example diagramming tool I like to use is Eraser. You can access it through eraser.io. So for question number 1 here as an example, I just used kind of the document view and pasted some of the question content into it. And then we also get sort of a canvas view where we have all kinds of diagramming tools, different shapes, all kinds of icons built into it. We can also do kind of a split screen both view here. Now, the feature I really like with Eraser is the AI capabilities. So for example, we can just kind of copy in our question text here, paste that into the prompt, and have us generate a diagram based on that question scenario. So for example, if maybe we didn't quite understand what a checkout process flow would look like, we can use the AI-generated diagram to kind of paint a better picture of what a proper workflow might look like and where the problems may exist. So once the diagram's done, we can just kind of move that over here and have a look. Now, this would be a pretty generic e-commerce workflow. Again, based on the question scenario, there wasn't a lot of detail, So the AI tool is giving us a general picture of what that workflow would look like. Now, even with this sort of generic e-commerce checkout workflow here, we can sort of see where the problems in the question scenario may exist. Again, the question is mentioning that customers are experiencing timeouts in their checkout process. There's abandoned carts and resulting in increased customer support calls. And the users are clicking on the checkout button again multiple times just due to frustration. And then every time they click on it, it seems to be creating a new order that isn't expected. So we can go back to the diagram here and kind of get an idea of where that problem might be occurring. So it makes sense here that we have a customer, they're clicking on the checkout button, some sort of checkout service or function, and it's writing those cart items to a database similar to what the question has provided us with here. But due to the fact in this scenario that every time a checkout button is clicked on, it's creating multiple orders, that possibly something's happening, for the retries or in this kind of loop here. So maybe in this case, there's no kind of retry logic built into the application. And there's no mechanism sort of built in so that customers can't create these sort of multiple orders into the database each time they click on the checkout button there. So this is just one example of how I often like to break apart questions and use diagramming tools like this to really get a visual of what the question's asking and start thinking about possible answers for it. So back to question 1, we're left with the question here of how should the solutions architect update the workflow to prevent the creation of multiple orders? And our available options are as follows. We have A, configure the web application to send an order message to Amazon Kinesis Data Firehose, set the payment service to retrieve the message from Kinesis Data Firehose and process the order. Or B, create a rule in AWS CloudTrail to invoke an AWS Lambda function based on the logged application path request. Use Lambda to query the database, call the payment service, and pass in the order information. Or C, store the order in the database. Send a message that includes the order number to Amazon Simple Notification Service, or Amazon SNS, and set the payment service to poll Amazon SNS, retrieve the message, and process the order. Or D, store the order in the database. Send a message that includes the order number to Amazon Simple Queue Service, or Amazon SQS, FIFO queue. Set the payment service to retrieve the message and process the order. Delete the message from the queue. And the correct answer here would be D, to store the order in the database. Then send a message that includes the order number to an Amazon SQS FIFO queue. Set the payment service to retrieve the message and process the order. Then delete the message from the queue. Question 2. A solutions architect is deploying a document analysis application using an S3 bucket for the document storage. The infrastructure design needs to prevent the accidental deletion of documents and also keep all the past versions of the documents. The documents are required to be accessible by the application users so they can download, upload, and update the documents. Which of the following actions should be taken to meet these requirements? Choose 2. Our options are A, enable a read-only bucket ACL, B, enable versioning on the bucket, C, enable versioning through the application API calls, D, enable MFA delete on the bucket, or E, encrypt the bucket using AWS KMS. And the correct answers here would be B, to enable versioning on the bucket, and D, enable MFA delete on the bucket. Question 3. A large enterprise organization is reviewing a recent migration of a 3-tier application to a VPC. The security team discovers that the principle of least privilege is not being applied to Amazon EC2 security group ingress and egress rules between the different application tiers. How can the principle of least privilege be implemented for this scenario? Our options are A, create security group rules using the instance ID as the source or destination, B, create security group rules using the security group ID as the source or destination, C, create security group rules using the VPC CIDR blocks as the source or destination, or D, create security group rules using the subnet CIDR blocks as the source or destination. The correct answer here would be B, Create security group rules using the security group ID as the source or destination. Question 4. A solutions architect needs to design a system to store client health records. The record files contain sensitive and important data. The number of files will continue to grow over time. The records must be accessible from multiple applications at the same time which run on Amazon EC2 instances. The solution design must have built-in redundancy for high availability requirements. What solution meets these requirements? Our options are A. Amazon Elastic File System, or Amazon EFS. B. Amazon Elastic Block Store, or Amazon EBS. C. Amazon S3 Glacier Deep Archive. Or D. AWS Backup. The correct answer here would be A. Amazon Elastic File System. Question 5. An organization is deploying new data retention policies for all their databases which run on Amazon RDS DB instances. The organization needs to retain daily backups for a minimum of 2 years. These backups must be consistent and available to restore the database from if needed. Which option should a solutions architect recommend to meet these requirements with a minimal operational effort? Our options are A. Create a backup vault in AWS Backup to retain RDS backups. Create a new backup plan with a daily schedule and an expiration period of 2 years after creation. Assign the RDS DB instances to the backup plan. B. Configure a backup window for the RDS DB instances for daily snapshots. Assign a snapshot retention policy of 2 years to each RDS DB instance. Use Amazon Data Lifecycle Manager, Amazon DLM, to schedule snapshot deletions. C. Configure database transaction logs to be automatically backed up to Amazon CloudWatch logs with an expiration. Or D. Configure an AWS Database Migration Service, AWS DMS, replication task. Deploy a replication instance and configure a Change Data Capture, CDC task to stream database changes to Amazon S3 as the target. Configure S3 lifecycle policies to delete the snapshot after 2 years. The correct answer here would be A. Create a backup vault in AWS Backup to retain RDS backups. Create a new backup plan with a daily schedule and an expiration period of 2 years after creation. Then assign the RDS DB instances to the backup plan. Question 6. A media company provides a dynamic website from a pool of Amazon EC2 instances fronted by an application load balancer, ALB. The website needs to support customers around the world in various languages. The site's architecture is running in the US East 2 region and is exhibiting high request latency for users that are in other parts of the world. The website needs to process requests with low latency regardless of the end-user location. Due to budget concerns, the media company does not want to build their current architecture across multiple regions. What option would you recommend to satisfy these requirements? Our options are A. Replace the existing architecture with a website that is served from an Amazon S3 bucket. Configure an Amazon CloudFront distribution with the S3 bucket as the origin. Set the cache behavior settings to cache based on the accept language request header. B. Configure an Amazon CloudFront distribution with the ALB as the origin. Set the cache behavior settings to cache based on the accept language HTTP request header. C. Create an Amazon API Gateway API that is integrated with the ALB. Configure the API to use the HTTP integration type. Set up an API Gateway stage to enable the API cache based on the accept language request header. D. Launch an EC2 instance in each additional region and configure Nginx to act as a cache server for that region. Put all the EC2 instances and the ALB behind an Amazon Route 53 record set with a geolocation routing policy. The correct answer here would be B. Configure an Amazon CloudFront distribution with an ALB as the origin. Set the cache behavior settings to cache based on the accept language HTTP request header. Question 7. A large company wants to create a human resources application that'll store employee data in a hierarchical structured relationship. The company needs a highly performant and low latency solution to handle the large volume of queries expected for the employee data. The solution must protect any sensitive employee data. The company also needs to receive monthly notifications through email if any sensitive financial information is present in the employee data being stored. Which combination of steps should a solutions architect take to meet these requirements? Choose 2. Our options are A. Use Amazon Redshift to store the employee data in hierarchies. Unload the data to Amazon S3 every month. B. Use Amazon DynamoDB to store the employee data in hierarchies. Export the data to Amazon S3 every month. C. Configure Amazon Macie for the AWS account. Integrate Amazon Macie with Amazon EventBridge to send monthly events to AWS Lambda. D. Use Amazon Athena to analyze the employee data in Amazon S3. Integrate Athena with Amazon QuickSight to publish analysis dashboards and share the dashboards with users. E. Configure Amazon Macie for the AWS account. Integrate Amazon Macie with Amazon EventBridge to send monthly notifications through an Amazon Simple Notification Service, Amazon SNS, subscription. The correct choices here would be B. Use Amazon DynamoDB to store the employee data in hierarchies, then export the data to Amazon S3 every month. And E. Configure Amazon Macie for the AWS account. Integrate Macie with Amazon EventBridge to send monthly notifications through an Amazon SNS subscription. Question 8. A company runs a simple web application that is deployed on Amazon EC2 instances in the private subnet of a VPC. An application load balancer that is configured across public subnets directs web traffic to the EC2 instances of the web application servers. The company wants to implement new security measures to restrict inbound traffic from the ALB to the EC2 instances while preventing access from other sources inside or outside the private subnet of the EC2 instances. Which option best meets these requirements? A. Configure a route in the route table to direct traffic from the internet to the private IP addresses of the EC2 instances. B. Configure the security group for the EC2 instances to only allow traffic that comes from the security group for the ALB. C. Move the EC2 instances into the public subnet. Give the EC2 instances a set of elastic IP addresses. D. Configure the security group for the ALB to allow any TCP traffic on any port. The correct answer here would be B. Configure the security group for the EC2 instances to only allow traffic that comes from the security group for the ALB. Question 9. A startup company is migrating Linux-based web servers from their office location to AWS. The web servers must access files in a shared file store for some site images. The company must not make any changes to the application. As a solutions architect, what action would best meet these requirements? A. Create an Amazon S3 standard bucket with access to the web servers. B. Configure an Amazon CloudFront distribution with an Amazon S3 bucket as the origin. C. Create an Amazon EFS file system. Mount the EFS file system on all the web servers. D. Configure a general-purpose SSD, GP3, Amazon Elastic Block Store, Amazon EBS volume. Mount the EBS volume to all web servers. The correct answer here would be C. To create an Amazon EFS file system, then mount the EFS file system on all the web servers. Question 10. An insurance company has an on-premises volume backup solution that has reached the end of its warranty period, and they're concerned about the failure risk of this old hardware storage solution. The company wants to use AWS as part of a new backup solution. They would like to keep their local access to all the data, while also ensuring it is backed up on AWS. The company wants to ensure that data being sent to AWS is transferred securely and any new data stored on-premises is automatically backed up on AWS. What solution meets these requirements? A. Use AWS Snowball to migrate data out of the on-premises solution to Amazon S3. Configure on-premises systems to mount the Snowball S3 endpoint to provide local access to the data. B. Use AWS Snowball Edge to migrate data out of the on-premises solution to Amazon S3. Use the Snowball Edge file interface to provide on-premises systems with local access to the data. C. Use AWS Storage Gateway to configure a cache volume gateway. Run the Storage Gateway software appliances on-premises and configure a percentage of the data to cache locally. Mount the gateway storage volumes to provide local access to the data. D. Use AWS Storage Gateway and configure a stored volume gateway. Run the Storage Gateway software appliances on-premises and map the gateway storage volumes to on-premises storage. Mount the gateway storage volumes to provide local access to the data. The correct answer here would be D. Use AWS Storage Gateway and configure a stored volume gateway. Run the Storage Gateway software appliances on-premises and map the gateway stored volumes to on-premises storage. Mount the gateway storage volumes to provide local access to the data. Now, in the Solutions Architect Associate exam, the answers themselves can often be quite wordy and have a lot of steps to them to apply a solution to the given question. And sometimes it's hard to understand all the steps involved and if those steps apply as the right answer to the question. So similar to what I demoed before, I often like to use the answers and kind of break those apart using diagram tools as well. Now, if we take a look at the answers here from question 10, I've copied them into the document section here, and we'll actually use these and input them into the AI tool again. Generate a new diagram. And just middle mouse button scroll over to move around the infinite canvas. Now, just so we don't get confused, I'm just going to put a box around these. So that's answer A. Paste that in, generate the diagram for answer B. We can actually do these in parallel as well. Draw a box around answer B. There's a diagram from answer C. And last but not least, we'll look at answer D and break that out. We can see in the AI tool here, there's different architecture types that you can pick here. The automatic mode will kind of detect based on what your inputs are, what kind of diagram to generate for you, because we're using a lot of AWS words in there and AWS services. It's automatically inferring the cloud architecture type. Just line this one up as well. Perfect. So now with all the answers diagrammed out for us, we can have a look at them and see if the steps make sense. We can look at the first one here, look at the general flow from the on-premises systems, having data source, using a Snowball client, and pushing that into the Amazon S3 bucket. Now, this is where I really like using these AI tools, is they're really helpful to get this visual picture, but they're also a good learning resource as well. Like most AI tools these days, especially because we're giving this tool the context of the exam answers here, and there's not a ton of detail to them. A lot of times you can get these hallucinations of services that don't actually exist. So using this tool can provide you that visual information, but it also kind of helps you to fact check as well. So if there's like maybe a service that you haven't heard of before, something like Snowball Client, does that service or feature actually exist in AWS? And is it something that's a right answer or not? So often you're forced to go back into AWS documentation and verify if that type of service or feature actually exists. So you're getting an experience of quickly fact-checking the AI diagrams against the AWS documentation and getting even more experience with those documentation tools, searching for answers, and getting exposure to potentially different services that you may not have heard of before, and also kind of ruling out ones that these AI tools may have hallucinated for you as well. So again, here I just wanted to highlight how, again, you can use these diagramming tools to help understand the answers as well. Again, as you're working through these practice questions here, don't hesitate to pause the video and kind of work through these answers and diagram them out to help you understand, especially those answers that have a lot of steps and sequences to them to help solve a given solution for the question. It can help you kind of understand the flow and maybe help point out what's sort of wrong with that answer to rule it out, or help you determine what the right answer or answers will be. Now, again, for our question 10 here, we had answer D as the correct one, where in our on-premises environment, we'd have the AWS Storage Gateway appliance configured with our local storage, and that would send the data across into the stored volume gateway in AWS. All right, so let's move on to question 11. A development team has created a new application which is running on Amazon EC2 instances inside a dev VPC. A cloud engineer needs to create a new VPC within the same account for some new shared resources. The new VPC will be paired with the dev VPC. The VPC CIDR block for the dev VPC is 192.168.47.0/24. A new CIDR block is needed for the new VPC to be created. The CIDR block must be valid for a VPC peering connection to the dev VPC. What is the smallest CIDR block that meets these requirements? Our options here are A, 192.168.48/24, B, 172.31.100.0/30, C, 192.168.47.0/29, or D, 10.0.1.0/28. And the correct answer here would be D, 10.0.1.0/28. Question 12. A mobile application development company is running an important business application on EC2 instances which are part of a target group associated with an application load balancer. The EC2 instances run in an autoscaling group and have network connectivity to an Amazon RDS DB instance. The company's management team raised concerns with the current design since the EC2 instances and the DB instance are all within a single availability zone. The company's solutions architect needs to update the current design to use a second availability zone. Which option will make the important business application highly available? A. Provision a subnet in each availability zone. Configure the autoscaling group to distribute the EC2 instances across both availability zones. Configure the DB instance with connections to each network. B. Provision two subnets that extend across both availability zones. Configure the autoscaling group to distribute the EC2 instances across both availability zones. Configure the DB instance with connections to each network. C. Provision a subnet in each availability zone. Configure the autoscaling group to distribute the EC2 instances across both availability zones. Configure the DB instance for multi-AZ deployment. D. Provision a subnet that extends across both availability zones. Configure the autoscaling group to distribute the EC2 instances across both availability zones, and then configure the DB instance for multi-AZ deployment. The correct answer here would be C. Provision a subnet in each availability zone. Configure the auto-scaling group to distribute the EC2 instances across both availability zones, then configure the DB instance for multi-AZ deployment. Question 13. A genetic research company needs to migrate 25 terabytes of data from an on-premises Windows file server to Amazon FSx for Windows File Server. The company currently has a 1 gigabit per second network link for the office location that is shared between a number of teams. The company is looking for recommendations for a data migration service that will maximize the performance of the data transfer, but be able to control the bandwidth of the data transfer so that the daily business activities of the teams are not negatively impacted by the data transfer. Due to compliance and other business reasons, the data migration can only run from Monday to Friday next week and must complete in this planned maintenance window. Which AWS solution would best meet these requirements and complete the data migration in the planned window? A. AWS Snowcone. B. Amazon FSx File Gateway. C. AWS Data Sync. Or D. AWS Transfer Family. The correct answer here would be C. AWS Data Sync. Question 14. An online retailer established a new disaster recovery site in a different AWS region. The company needs to synchronize the data currently stored on an AWS Managed Network File System service between the two regions. Which solution will enable a read-only copy of the data in a different AWS region for their disaster recovery requirements with the least operational overhead? Our choices are A. Use Amazon EFS replication. B. Use AWS Snowball devices. C. Set up a SFTP server on EC2. Or D. Use AWS DMS. The correct answer here would be A. Use Amazon EFS replication. Question 15. A company that primarily runs its application services on premises has decided to migrate to AWS. The company wants to minimize its need to scale its iSCSI-based storage on premises. Only data that has been accessed recently needs to remain stored on premises. Which AWS solution should the company use to meet these requirements? Our options are A. AWS S3 File Gateway. B. AWS Storage Gateway Tape Gateway. C. AWS Storage Gateway Volume Gateway Stored Volumes. Or D. AWS Storage Gateway Volume Gateway Cached Volumes. The correct answer here is D. AWS Storage Gateway Volume Gateway Cached Volumes. Question 16. A company sells research data to customers who perform machine learning analysis on it. The data is in the form of large Parquet files that are stored in an Amazon S3 bucket in the US West 1 region. The company allows the research customers to purchase dataset access through an online portal. The web portal is scaled across multiple Amazon EC2 instances behind an application load balancer. After a dataset purchase transaction is completed, customers receive an S3 signed URL that allows access to the dataset. The research users are distributed across North America and Australia. The company is looking for solutions to reduce the network transfer costs while not introducing any more latency or slowing down the dataset download performance for their customers. What should a solutions architect do to meet these requirements? Our choices are A. Configure S3 transfer acceleration on the existing S3 bucket, direct customer requests to the S3 transfer acceleration endpoint, and then continue to use S3 signed URLs for access control. B. Deploy an Amazon CloudFront distribution with the existing S3 bucket as the origin. Direct customer requests to the CloudFront URL. Switch to CloudFront signed URLs for access control. C. Set up a second S3 bucket in the EU Central 1 region with S3 cross-region replication between the buckets. Direct customer requests to the closest region. Continue to use S3 signed URLs for access control. D. Modify the web application to enable streaming of the datasets to end users. Configure the web application to read the data from the existing S3 bucket, implement access control directly in the application. The correct answer here would be B. Deploy an Amazon CloudFront distribution with the existing S3 bucket as the origin. Direct customer requests to the CloudFront URL. Switch to the CloudFront signed URLs for access control. 17. A media company is building a mobile app that will be hosted on AWS. The company growth projections indicate they will need to scale to handle 5 million users within the next 6 months. A mobile app platform is needed where authorized customers can watch the company's media content on their mobile devices. Which option would best meet these requirements? A. Publish content to a public Amazon S3 bucket. Use AWS Key Management Service, AWS KMS, keys to stream content. B. Set up IPsec VPN between the mobile app and the AWS environment to stream content. C. Use Amazon CloudFront. Provide signed URLs to stream content. D. Set up AWS Client VPN between the mobile app and the AWS environment to stream content. The correct answer here would be C. Use Amazon CloudFront. Provide signed URLs to stream content. Question 18. A small startup organization has an on-premises MySQL database used by their human resources department. The database is typically only used every 2 weeks for payroll activities. Although the database is not used by the HR team often, they require the database to have minimal downtime so that important automated transactions can occur. A new database administrator is suggesting to migrate the database to AWS. Due to the company growth expected and heavier transactional demands on the database for future human resources requirements, they would prefer not to pick a specific instance type as the size needed is very difficult to predict at this point, and would like to avoid any operational overhead in the future to change instance types. What service should the company's solutions architect recommend to the database administrator for this scenario? Our options are A. Amazon Aurora MySQL. B. Amazon Aurora Serverless for MySQL. C. Amazon Aurora Flex Engine. Or D. Amazon RDS for MySQL. The correct answer here would be B. Amazon Aurora Serverless for MySQL. Question 19. What should a solutions architect do to ensure that all objects uploaded to an Amazon S3 bucket are encrypted? Our options are A. Update the bucket policy to deny if the put object does not have an S3 XAMZ ACL header set. B. Update the bucket policy to deny if the put object does not have an S3 XAMZ ACL header set to private. C. Update the bucket policy to deny if the put object does not have an AWS Secure Transport header set to true. D. Update the bucket policy to deny if the put object does not have an XAMZ server-side encryption header set. The correct answer here is D. Update the bucket policy to deny if the put object does not have an XAMZ server-side encryption header set. Question 20. A warehouse building has entry badge readers at all access points throughout the facility. When the access badges are scanned, the reader devices send a JSON-based event message over HTTPS to record who attempted to access specific entry points in the building. As a solutions architect, you must design a robust solution to process these JSON message payloads from the sensors. High availability of the solution is critical. The entry point access events must be made available for the company's security team to analyze. Which solution design architecture should the solutions architect recommend? A. Launch an Amazon EC2 instance to serve as the HTTPS endpoint and to process the messages. Configure the EC2 instances to save the results to an Amazon S3 bucket. B. Create an HTTPS endpoint in Amazon API Gateway. Configure the API Gateway endpoint to invoke an AWS Lambda function to process the messages and save the results to an Amazon DynamoDB table. C. Use Amazon Route 53 to direct incoming sensor messages to an AWS Lambda function. Configure the Lambda function to process the messages and save the results to an Amazon DynamoDB table. D. Create a gateway VPC endpoint for Amazon S3. Configure a site-to-site VPN connection from the facility network to the VPC so that the sensor data can be written directly to an S3 bucket by way of the VPC endpoint. The correct answer here would be B. Create an HTTPS endpoint in Amazon API Gateway. Configure the API Gateway endpoint to invoke an AWS Lambda function to process the messages and save the results to an Amazon DynamoDB table. Question 21. A security audit being conducted at a large enterprise has revealed that Amazon EC2 instances are not being regularly updated with security patches. A solutions architect needs to provide a solution that enables automated, frequent security scans across a large inventory of EC2 instances being used. To avoid additional operational overhead on the IT teams, the solution must also patch these EC2 instances on a regular basis. To assist with future auditing and reporting requirements, a report of each EC2 instance patch status is needed. Which solution best meets these requirements? A. Set up Amazon Macie to scan the EC2 instances for software vulnerabilities. Set up a cron job on each EC2 instance to patch the instance on a regular schedule. B. Turn on Amazon Guard Duty in the account. Configure Guard Duty to scan the EC2 instances for software vulnerabilities. Set up AWS Systems Manager Session Manager to patch the EC2 instances on a regular schedule. C. Set up Amazon Detective to scan the EC2 instances for software vulnerabilities. Set up an Amazon EventBridge scheduled rule to patch the EC2 instances on a regular schedule. D. Turn on Amazon Inspector in the account. Configure Amazon Inspector to scan the EC2 instances for software vulnerabilities. Set up AWS Systems Manager Patch Manager to patch the EC2 instances on a regular schedule. The correct answer here would be D. Turn on Amazon Inspector in the account. Configure Amazon Inspector to scan the EC2 instances for software vulnerabilities. Then set up AWS Systems Manager Patch Manager to patch the EC2 instances on the regular schedule. Question 22. A company sales application runs on Amazon EC2 instances behind an application load balancer, ALB, to balance the load. The instances are part of an autoscaling group spread across multiple availability zones within the region. On the last day of every month at 11 p.m., the application becomes unresponsive due to the month-end financial calculation batch runs. Monitoring info indicates the CPU utilization of the EC2 instances suddenly spikes to 100% during this batch run process. What could a solutions architect suggest so the application is able to handle the batch reporting process and avoid application performance impacts for users? A. Configure an Amazon CloudFront distribution in front of the ALB. B. Configure an EC2 autoscaling simple scaling policy based on CPU utilization. C. Configure an EC2 autoscaling scheduled scaling policy based on the monthly schedule. D. Configure Amazon Elasticache to remove some of the workload from the EC2 instances. The correct answer here would be C. Configure an EC2 autoscaling scheduled scaling policy based on the monthly schedule. Question 23. A shipping logistics company hosts a multi-tier web application in AWS that uses an Amazon Aurora MySQL DB cluster for storage. The application tier is installed across Amazon EC2 instances. Due to new regulatory requirements the business needs to comply with, database credentials are required to be encrypted and rotated every 14 days. Which option would meet these requirements and offer the least operational effort for their IT department? A. Create a new AWS Key Management Service, AWS KMS, encryption key. Use AWS Secrets Manager to create a new secret that uses the KMS key with the appropriate credentials. Associate the secret with the Aurora DB cluster. Configure a custom rotation period of 14 days. B. Create two parameters in AWS Systems Manager Parameter Store, one for the username as a string parameter and one that uses the secure string type for the password. Select AWS Key Management Service, AWS KMS encryption, for the password parameter and load these parameters in the application tier. Implement an AWS Lambda function that rotates the password every 14 days. C. Store a file that contains the credentials in an AWS KMS encrypted Amazon EFS file system. Mount the EFS file system in all EC2 instances of the application tier. Restrict the access to the file on the file system so that the application can read the file and that only super users can modify the file. Implement an AWS Lambda function that rotates the key in Aurora every 14 days and writes new credentials into the file. D. Store a file that contains the credentials in an AWS KMS encrypted Amazon S3 bucket that the application uses to load the credentials. Download the file to the application regularly to ensure that the correct credentials are used. Implement an AWS Lambda function that rotates the Aurora credentials every 14 days and uploads these credentials to the file in the S3 bucket. The correct answer here with the least operational effort would be A. Create a new AWS KMS encryption key. Use AWS Secrets Manager to create a new secret that uses the KMS key with the appropriate credentials. Associate the secret with the Aurora DB cluster. Configure a custom rotation period of 14 days. Question 24. A company has a custom application with embedded credentials that retrieves information from an Amazon RDS MySQL DB instance. Management says that the application must be made more secure with the least amount of programming effort. What should a solutions architect do to meet these requirements? A. Use AWS KMS to create keys. Configure the application to load the database credentials from AWS KMS. Enable automatic key rotation. B. Create credentials on the RDS for MySQL database for the application user and store the credentials in AWS Secrets Manager. Configure the application to load the database credentials from Secrets Manager. Create an AWS Lambda function that rotates the credentials in Secrets Manager. C. Create credentials on the RDS for MySQL database for the application user and store the credentials in AWS Secrets Manager. Configure the application to load the database credentials from Secrets Manager. Set up a credentials rotation schedule for the application user in the RDS for MySQL database using Secrets Manager. D. Create credentials on the RDS for MySQL database for the application user and store the credentials in AWS Systems Manager Parameter Store. Configure the application to load the database credentials from Parameter Store. Set up a credentials rotation schedule for the application user in the RDS for MySQL database using Parameter Store. The correct answer here would be C. To create credentials on the RDS for MySQL database for the application user and then store the credentials in AWS Secrets Manager. Configure the application to load the database credentials from Secrets Manager. Set up a credentials rotation schedule for the application user in the RDS for MySQL database using Secrets Manager. Question 25. A pharmaceutical company has an Amazon S3 data lake that is governed through AWS Lake Formation. The company would like to create data visualizations using Amazon QuickSight. They plan on joining the data in the data lake with other research data that is stored in an Amazon Aurora MySQL database. The company's sales team would like to use the data visualizations. However, the security team wants to enforce column-level authorization so the sales team can only access a subset of columns within the database. Which of the following solutions will meet these requirements with the least operational overhead? A. Use Amazon EMR to ingest the data directly from the database to the QuickSight Spice engine. Include only the required columns. B. Use AWS Glue Studio to ingest the data from the database to the S3 data lake. Attach an IAM policy to the QuickSight users to enforce column-level access control. Use Amazon S3 as the data source in QuickSight. C. Use AWS Glue Elastic Views to create a materialized view for the database in Amazon S3. Create a S3 bucket policy to enforce column-level access control for the QuickSight users. Use Amazon S3 as the data source in QuickSight. Or D. Use a lake formation blueprint to ingest the data from the database to the S3 data lake. Use lake formation to enforce column-level access control for the QuickSight users. Use Amazon Athena as the data source in QuickSight. The correct answer here, again with the least operational overhead, would be D. Use a lake formation blueprint to ingest the data from the database to the S3 data lake. Use lake formation to enforce column-level access control for the QuickSight users. Use Amazon Athena as the data source in QuickSight. Question 26. A new cloud architect at a company is reviewing their disaster recovery capabilities. The company has a MySQL database installed on an Amazon EC2 instance. The database is running in a private subnet with scheduled backups in place. The business needs to improve their DR design to include multiple AWS regions. Which solution will meet these requirements with the least operational overhead for the business? A. Migrate the MySQL database to multiple EC2 instances. Configure a standby EC2 instance in the DR region. Turn on replication. B. Migrate the MySQL database to Amazon RDS. Use a multi-AZ deployment. Turn on read replication for the primary DB instance in the different availability zones. C. Migrate the MySQL database to an Amazon Aurora global database. Host the primary DB cluster in the primary region. Host the secondary DB cluster in the DR region. D. Store the scheduled backup of the MySQL database in an Amazon S3 bucket that's configured for S3 cross-region replication. Use the data backup to restore the database in the DR region. The correct answer here would be C. Migrate the MySQL database to an Amazon Aurora global database. Host the primary DB cluster in the primary region. Host the secondary DB cluster in the DR region. 27. A company has a legacy network-attached storage (NAS) solution in its data center. The NAS storage presents SMB shares and NFS shares to client workstations. The company doesn't want to purchase new storage hardware or have the expense of renewing the NAS solution's support contract with the vendor. An infrastructure engineer at the organization performed an audit of the storage utilization and determined that some of the data is accessed frequently, but most of the data is old and has not been accessed for years. A solution architect determined that the data should be migrated to Amazon S3, use S3 lifecycle policies to help reduce costs for the old data. The users of the storage system demand that the new solution maintains the same look and feel for their client workstations. The solutions architect has identified AWS Storage Gateway as part of the solution. What type of storage gateway should the solutions architect provision to meet these requirements? A. Volume Gateway. B. Tape Gateway. C. Amazon FSx File Gateway. Or D. Amazon S3 File Gateway. The correct answer here would be D. Amazon S3 File Gateway. 28. A company stores confidential data in an Amazon Aurora Postgres database in the US East 2 region. The database is encrypted with an AWS KMS customer managed key. The company recently underwent an acquisition and now needs to securely share a backup of the database with the acquiring company's AWS account in US East 2. What should a solutions architect do to meet these requirements? A. Create a database snapshot. Copy the snapshot to a new unencrypted snapshot. Share the new snapshot with the acquiring company's AWS account. B. Create a database snapshot. Add the acquiring company's AWS account to the KMS key policy. Share the snapshot with the acquiring company's AWS account. C. Create a database snapshot that uses a different AWS managed KMS key. Add the acquiring company's AWS account to the KMS key alias. Share the snapshot with the acquiring company's AWS account. D. Create a database snapshot. Download the database snapshot. Upload the database snapshot to an Amazon S3 bucket. Update the S3 bucket policy to allow access from the acquiring company's AWS account. The correct answer here would be B. Create a database snapshot, then add the acquiring company's AWS account to the KMS key policy, then share the snapshot with the acquiring company's AWS account. Question 29. A company uses a 250 GB Amazon RDS for Microsoft SQL Server's single AZ DB instance in the US East 2 region to store customer purchase transactions. As the data is important to the operation of the online retail company, they need a highly available and automatic recovery for the DB instance. The company must also perform complex audit reports on the RDS database several times a year. The performance impacts of generating the reports causes transactions to take longer than usual to process the purchase transactions. The company needs a solution that will improve the performance of the report process so the customer experience is not impacted. Which combination of steps will meet these requirements? Choose 2. A. Modify the DB instance from a single AZ DB instance to a multi-AZ deployment. B. Take a snapshot of the current DB instance. Restore the snapshot to a new RDS deployment in another availability zone. C. Create a read replica of the DB instance in a different availability zone. Point all requests for the reports to the read replica. D. Migrate the database to RDS warehouse. E. Use RDS proxy to limit reporting requests to the maintenance window. The best answers here are A. Modify the DB instance from a single AZ DB instance to a multi-AZ deployment, and C. Create a read replica of the DB instance in a different availability zone. Point all requests for reports to the read replica. Question 30. A company stores its data objects in the Amazon S3 storage service using the standard tier. A solutions architect has found that 82% of the data is rarely accessed after 30 days. The company needs all the data to remain instantly accessible with the same high availability and resiliency that exists today. The data is very important to the business, however, the company needs to find ways to optimize their storage costs. Which storage solution will provide the most cost-effective solution that meets these requirements? A. Move the data objects to S3 Glacier Deep Archive after 30 days. B. Move the data objects to S3 Standard Infrequent Access after 30 days. C. Move the data objects to S3 One Zone Infrequent Access after 30 days. Or D. Move the data objects to S3 One Zone Infrequent Access immediately. The best answer here would be B. Move the data objects to S3 Standard Infrequent Access after 30 days. 31. A mobile gaming company hosts a multiplayer application on AWS. The company wants the application to read data with sub-millisecond latency for the optimal gaming experience and to allow the ability to run one-time queries on historical data. Which solution will meet this criteria with the least operational overhead? A. Use Amazon RDS for data that is frequently accessed. Run a periodic custom script to export the data to an Amazon S3 bucket. B. Store the data directly in an Amazon S3 bucket. Implement an S3 lifecycle policy to move older data to S3 Glacier Deep Archive for long-term storage. Run one-time queries on the data in Amazon S3 by using Amazon Athena. C. Use Amazon DynamoDB with DynamoDB Accelerator, DAX, for data that is frequently accessed. Export the data to an Amazon S3 bucket by using DynamoDB Table Export. Run one-time queries on the data in Amazon S3 by using Amazon Athena. D. Use Amazon DynamoDB for data that is frequently accessed. Turn on streaming to Amazon Kinesis data streams. Use Amazon Kinesis Data Firehose to read the data from Kinesis data streams. Store the records in an Amazon S3 bucket. The correct answer here is C. Use Amazon DynamoDB with DAX for data that is frequently accessed. Export the data to an Amazon S3 bucket by using DynamoDB Table Export. Run one-time queries on the data in Amazon S3 by using Amazon Athena. 32. A complex web application is backed by Amazon RDS. A new database administrator at the company caused data loss by accidentally modifying a database table. The recovery time to restore the database caused a large financial impact to the business. The company wants a better solution to quickly recover from this type of incident if it happens again. The company wants the ability to restore the database to a point in time before any change was made within the last 30 days. Which feature should the solutions architect include in the design to meet this requirement? A. Read replicas. B. Manual snapshots. C. automated backups, or D, multi-AZ deployments? The correct answer here is C, automated backups. 33. A company is using Amazon Route 53 for DNS routing using the latency-based option to best direct requests to their application for their global user base. The application is hosted on redundant servers on the company's on-premises data centers across Canada, Asia, and Europe. The company's updated compliance requirements mention that the application must be hosted on-premises. The company is looking to their engineering team to figure out ways to improve the performance and availability of the application. What should the solutions architect do to meet these requirements and provide a better experience for the global application users? A. Configure 3 NLBs in the 3 AWS regions to address the on-premises endpoints. Create an accelerator by using AWS Global Accelerator and register the NLBs as its endpoints. Provide access to the application by using a CNAME that points to the accelerator DNS. B. Configure 3 ALBs in the 3 AWS regions to address the on-premises endpoints. Create an accelerator by using AWS Global Accelerator and register the ALBs as its endpoints. Provide access to the application by using a CNAME that points to the accelerator DNS. C. Configure 3 NLBs in the 3 AWS regions to address the on-premises endpoints. In Route 53, create a latency-based record that points to the 3 NLBs and use it as an origin for an Amazon CloudFront distribution. Provide access to the application by using a CNAME that points to the CloudFront DNS. D. Configure 3 ALBs in the 3 AWS regions to address the on-premises endpoints. In Route 53, create a latency-based record that points to the 3 ALBs and use it as an origin for the Amazon CloudFront distribution. Provide access to the application by using a CNAME that points to the CloudFront DNS. The correct answer here is C. Configure 3 NLBs in the 3 AWS regions to address the on-premises endpoints. Then in Route 53, create a latency-based record that points to the 3 NLBs and use it as an origin for the Amazon CloudFront distribution. Provide access to the application by using the CNAME that points to the CloudFront DNS. 34. A cloud architect wants all new users to have specific password complexity requirements so that they can comply with the latest business security requirements. In addition to the complexity requirements, there's also a mandatory rotation period needed for IAM user passwords. What should the solutions architect do to enable and enforce this with minimal effort? A. Set an overall password policy for the entire AWS account. B. Set a password policy for each IAM user in the AWS account. C. Use third-party vendor software to set password requirements. D. Attach an Amazon CloudWatch rule to the Create New User event to set the password with the appropriate requirements. The correct answer here would be A. Set an overall password policy for the entire AWS account. 35. A company operates a public 3-tier web application in an AWS VPC. The application runs on Amazon EC2 instances across multiple availability zones. The EC2 instances that run in private subnets need network connectivity over the internet with a licensed server. The engineering team at the company is very small and want to minimize the operational overhead as much as possible. What solution meets these requirements? A. Provision a NAT instance in a public subnet. Modify each private subnet's route table with a default route that points to NAT instances. B. Provision a NAT instance in a private subnet. Modify each private subnet's route table with a default route that points to the NAT instance. C. Provision a NAT gateway in a public subnet. Modify each private subnet's route table with a default route that points to the NAT gateway. D. Provision a NAT gateway in a private subnet. Modify each private subnet's route table with a default route that points to the NAT gateway. The correct answer here is C. Provision a NAT gateway in a public subnet. Modify each private subnet's route table with a default route that points to the NAT gateway. 36. A company is running business applications in 3 separate VPCs within the US West 2 region. The applications require connectivity between VPCs. The applications send over 600 gigabytes of data every day to another latency-sensitive application that runs in a single on-premises data center. As a solutions architect, you've been asked to design a network connectivity solution that maximizes cost-effectiveness. What solution best meets all these requirements and optimizes costs? A. Configure 3 AWS site-to-site VPN connections from the data center to AWS. Establish connectivity by configuring one VPN connection for each VPC. B. Launch a third-party virtual network appliance in each VPC. Establish an IPsec VPN tunnel between the data center and each virtual appliance. C. Set up 3 AWS Direct Connect connections from the data center to a Direct Connect gateway in US West 2. Establish connectivity by configuring each VPC to use one of the Direct Connect connections. D. Set up one of the AWS Direct Connect connections from the data center to AWS. Create a transit gateway and attach each VPC to the transit gateway. Establish connectivity between the Direct Connect connection and the transit gateway. The correct answer here would be D. Set up one AWS Direct Connect connection from the data center to AWS. Create a transit gateway and attach each VPC to the transit gateway. Establish connectivity between the Direct Connect connection and the transit gateway. 37. An online retail company is developing a distributed application that involves several serverless functions and AWS services to complete the complex order processing task. These tasks require human review and approvals as part of the workflow. A solutions architect needs to create a design for this order processing application. The solution must be able to combine multiple AWS Lambda functions into high-performing serverless applications. The solution also must manage the various data processing pipelines involved and services that run on Amazon EC2 instances, containers, or on-premises servers. What solution will meet the requirements for this highly distributed order processing application with the least operational overhead? A. Use AWS step functions to build the application. B. Integrate all the application components in an AWS glue job. C. Use Amazon Simple Queue Service, Amazon SQS, to build the application. Or D. Use AWS Lambda functions and Amazon Event Bridge events to build the application. The best answer here with the least operational overhead would be A. Use AWS step functions to build the application. 38. An insurance company recently rolled out a new auditing system that centralizes information about operating system versions in use, patching status, and all the installed software for Amazon EC2 instances. A solutions architect must ensure all instances provisioned through EC2 autoscaling groups successfully integrates into the auditing system as soon as they're launched and terminated to update the centralized reporting tool with the required information. Which solution achieves these goals most efficiently? A. Use a scheduled AWS Lambda function and run a script remotely on all EC2 instances to send data to the audit system. B. Use EC2 autoscaling lifecycle hooks to run a custom script to send data to the audit system when instances are launched and terminated. C. Use an EC2 autoscaling launch configuration to run a custom script through user data to send data to the audit system when instances are launched and terminated. D. Run a custom script on the instance operating system to send data to the audit system. Configure the script to be invoked by the EC2 autoscaling group when the instance starts and is terminated. The best answer here would be B. Use EC2 autoscaling lifecycle hooks to run a custom script to send data to the audit system when instances are launched and terminated. Question 39. A company has a 3-tier application on AWS that ingests sensor data from its users' devices. The traffic is routed through an NLB, then targets Amazon EC2 instances for the web tier and other EC2 instances for the application tier. The application tier requires connectivity to a relational database. What should a solutions architect do to improve the security of the data in transit? A. Configure a TLS listener. Deploy the server certificate on the NLB. B. Configure AWS Shield Advanced. Enable AWS WAF on the NLB. C. Change the load balancer to an application load balancer. Enable AWS WAF on the ALB. D. Encrypt the Amazon EBS volume on the EC2 instances by using AWS KMS. The correct answer is A. Configure TLS listener. Deploy the server certificate on the NLB. Question 40. A company is restructuring their network design after a recent acquisition. A cloud architect is creating a new VPC structure as a result. Within the VPC, there will be 2 public subnets for the load balancer, 2 private subnets for the web servers, and 2 private subnets for the MySQL database. The web server traffic comes in over HTTPS. The solutions architect has already created a security group for the load balancer, allowing port 443 from the wildcard of 0.0.0.0/0. Company policy requires that each resource has the least access required to still be able to perform its tasks. Which additional configuration strategy should the solutions architect use to meet these requirements? So this is the type of question where it might be helpful to have a diagram to help us understand what's going on here a bit better. Now, in the question itself, there's a lot of additional context that we don't really need to help the AI tool generate a diagram for us, and really it might actually confuse it. So what I've done is actually take the core information out of the question that I think is relevant for us. So based on the question here, we essentially want to create an AWS VPC, and we know we have a load balancer that's in 2 public subnets. We also have web servers across 2 private subnets and a MySQL database in 2 other private subnets. Also, based on the information we have here, I'm making some assumptions that there's going to be traffic coming in from the internet just because the load balancers are sitting in public subnets. And I've also included the information that the load balancer has a security group rule allowing the HTTPS port 443 from the wildcard of 0.0.0.0, and just see what that gives us as well. So I'm just going to copy our reformatted question, paste that in here. I'm just going to leave the auto detect feature enabled, or you can also get more specific and pick the cloud architecture one. If you have AWS or AWS service names as part of the information you're giving it, it really does a great job in determining the correct diagram type to use. Now, based on how many components there are and the complexity of the information provided, it can sometimes take a minute or two to generate the diagram, but you can see it sort of layers the diagram as it's building it and refines it as it goes. Perfect. So overall, I think it did a pretty good job here. We have the basic flow to help us kind of understand the question a bit better. We have the load balancer again, that should be associated within the public subnets here. And we have the MySQL databases in the 2 private subnets. Now, just for our purposes here to help understand the question, I think that's sort of good enough to give us that visual context of what's going on. All the diagram information is available as code here as well, so you can basically edit the code here, which will reflect in the diagram. So you can sort of edit things to your taste depending on your needs and how accurate you want it. But again, just for our practice questions, the AI diagrams are really quick without requiring a lot of effort and time. I can sometimes just paste the questions in as is, and gives us sort of that visual to work with. So now that we have a general idea of sort of the traffic flows here and where the security groups would be applied based on the question and potential answers we'll get, we can kind of reference the diagram and see which one might be the best fit. Which additional configuration strategy should the solutions architect use to meet these requirements? A. Create a security group for the web servers that allow port 443 from 0.0.0.0/0. Create a security group for the MySQL servers that allow port 3306 from the web servers security group. B. Create a network ACL for the web servers that allow port 443 from 0.0.0.0/0. Create a network ACL for the MySQL servers and allow port 3306 from the web servers security group. C. Create a security group for the web servers that allow port 443 from the load balancer. Create a security group for the MySQL servers and allow port 3306 from the web servers security group. D. Create a network ACL for the web servers and allow port 443 from the load balancer. Create a network ACL for the MySQL servers and allow port 3306 from the web servers security group. The answer here would be C. Create a security group for the web servers and allow port 443 from the load balancer. Create a security group for the MySQL servers and allow port 3306 from the web servers security group. 41. A startup company has recently deployed a two-tier web application in a single VPC. This web tier is using an Amazon EC2 autoscaling group with public subnets that spread across multiple AZs. The application's database tier uses Amazon RDS for MySQL configured across private subnets. The web tier needs access to the database to retrieve product inventory data. As soon as the web application was deployed, the team discovered it was not working as intended. The web application logs provide clues that it's unable to connect to the database. The DBA team has confirmed the database is fully operational. All configurations for the network ACLs, security groups, and route tables are still in their default states. What should a solutions architect recommend to fix the application? A. Add an explicit rule to the private subnet's network ACL to allow traffic from the web tier's EC2 instances. B. Add a route in the VPC route table to allow all traffic between the web tier's EC2 instances and the database tier. C. Deploy the web tier's EC2 instances and the database tier's RDS instance into two separate VPCs and configure VPC peering. D. Add an inbound rule to the security group of the database tier's RDS instance to allow traffic from the web tier's security group. The correct answer here would be D. Add an inbound rule to the security group of the database tier's RDS instance to allow all traffic from the web tier's security group. 42. An IAM user with administrator permissions made a bunch of changes to AWS resources in the company's account during a production deployment last week. A solutions architect later discovered that a couple of security group rules are not configured as expected. The solutions architect wants to confirm which IAM user was responsible for making the changes. Which service should the solutions architect use to find the desired information? A. Amazon Guard Duty. B. Amazon Inspector. C. AWS CloudTrail. Or D. AWS Config. The best answer here would be C. AWS CloudTrail. 43. A new AI company plans to use Amazon Elasticache for its multi-tier web application. A solutions architect creates a dedicated cache VPC for the Elasticache cluster and an application VPC for the application's Amazon EC2 instances. Both VPCs are in the US East 1 region, as this is the closest region to the majority of the existing users. The solutions architect must come up with a solution to provide the application EC2 instances with secure access to the Elasticache cluster. Which solution will meet these requirements most cost-effectively? A. Create a peering connection between the VPCs. Add a route table entry for the peering connection in both VPCs. Configure an inbound rule for the Elasticache cluster security group to allow inbound connection from the application security group. B. Create a transit VPC. Update the VPC route tables in the cache VPC and the app VPC to route traffic through the transit VPC. Configure an inbound rule for the Elasticache cluster security group to allow inbound connection from the application security group. C. Create a peering connection between the VPCs. Add a route table entry for the peering connections in both VPCs. Configure an inbound rule for the peering connection security group to allow inbound connection from the application security group. D. Create a transit VPC. Update the VPC route tables in the cache VPC and app VPC to route traffic through the transit VPC. Configure an inbound rule for the transit VPC security group to allow inbound connection from the application security group. The most cost-effective solution here would be A. Create a peering connection between the VPCs. Add a route table entry for the peering connection in both VPCs. Create an inbound rule for the ElastiCache cluster security group to allow inbound connection from the application security group. 44. A company has a popular gaming platform with a large global user base. The application is sensitive to latency because latency can impact the gaming experience and cause negative in-game results for the players. The application is deployed in every AWS region to support its global users. The application primarily runs on Amazon EC2 instances that are part of autoscaling groups configured behind ALBs. A solution architect needs to provide an observability solution to monitor the health of the application and quickly redirect traffic to healthy regional endpoints. Which solution would meet these requirements? A. Configure an accelerator in AWS Global Accelerator. Add a listener for the port that the application listens on and attach it to a regional endpoint in each region. Add the ALB as the endpoint. B. Configure an accelerator in AWS Global Accelerator. Add a security group rule for the port that the application listens on and attach it to a regional endpoint in each region. Add the ALB as the endpoint. C. Create an Amazon CloudFront distribution and specify Amazon S3 as the origin server. Configure the cache behavior to use origin cache headers. Use AWS Lambda functions to optimize the traffic. D. Configure an Amazon DynamoDB database to serve as the data store for the application. Create a DynamoDB accelerator DAX cluster to act as the in-memory cache for DynamoDB hosting the application data. The best answer here would be A. Configure an accelerator in AWS Global Accelerator. Add a listener for the port that the application listens on and attach it to a regional endpoint in each region. Add the ALB as the endpoint. 45. A company is using a centralized AWS account to store application and infrastructure log data in various Amazon S3 buckets. The company's security policies require that the data is encrypted before it is stored in S3 buckets, and the data is encrypted in transit when uploaded. Which solution meets these requirements? A. Use client-side encryption to encrypt the data that is being uploaded to the S3 buckets. B. Use server-side encryption to encrypt the data that is being uploaded to the S3 buckets. C. Create bucket policies that require the use of server-side encryption with S3 managed encryption keys for S3 uploads. D. Enable a security group option to encrypt the S3 buckets using a default AWS KMS key. The answer here would be A. Use client-side encryption to encrypt the data that is being uploaded to the S3 buckets. 46. A solutions architect notices that a nightly batch processing job is automatically scaled up, but it takes over an hour before the desired EC2 capacity is reached due to the number of startup scripts that run on each host as the instance is created. The peak capacity needed for the batch processing is the same every night, and the batch jobs always start at 3 a.m. The solutions architect has been asked to find a cost-effective solution that will allow for the desired EC2 capacity to be reached quickly and allow the autoscaling group to scale down after the batch jobs are complete. What should the solutions architect do to meet these requirements? A. Increase the minimum capacity for the autoscaling group. B. Increase the maximum capacity for the autoscaling group. C. Configure scheduled scaling to scale up to the desired compute level. D. Change the scaling policy to add more EC2 instances during each scaling operation. The best answer here would be C. Configure scheduled scaling to scale up to the desired compute level. 47. A company has deployed a new application on Amazon EC2 instances. The company needs a DR solution for the application. The DR solution needs to have an RTO of less than 6 hours. The DR solution also needs to use the fewest possible AWS resources to save costs when there's no need for it. Which solution will meet these requirements in the most efficient way to optimize operational overhead and costs? A. Create Amazon Machine Images, AMIs, to back up the EC2 instances. Copy the AMIs to a secondary AWS region. Automate infrastructure deployment in the secondary region by using AWS Lambda and custom scripts. B. Create AMIs to back up the EC2 instances. Copy the AMIs to a secondary AWS region. Automate infrastructure deployment in the secondary region by using AWS CloudFormation. C. Launch EC2 instances in a secondary AWS region. Keep the EC2 instances in the secondary region active at all times. D. Launch EC2 instances in a secondary availability zone. Keep the EC2 instances in the secondary availability zone active at all times. The best answer here would be B. Create AMIs to back up the EC2 instances, copy the AMIs to a secondary AWS region, then automate infrastructure deployment in the secondary region using AWS CloudFormation. 48. A finance team has started their budget planning for the year, and they're requesting a report of AWS costs broken down by user within the company. The company has already implemented a robust tagging strategy for their AWS resources where a variety of useful metadata is available, including an owner tag name, which is intended to indicate who's responsible for that given resource. The goal of the request is that the finance team would leverage this data to create new department cost categories to help forecast and track the budget. A solutions architect needs to determine the most efficient way to obtain this report information. Which solution meets these requirements? A. Run a query with Amazon Athena to generate the report. B. Create a report in Cost Explorer and download the report. C. Access the bill details from the billing dashboard and download the AWS invoice. D. Modify a cost budget in AWS Budgets to alert with Amazon SES. The best option here would be B. Create a report in Cost Explorer and download the report. 49. A company has an AWS Lambda function that only requires read access to an S3 bucket that's located in the same account. Which solution will meet these requirements in the most secure manner? A. Apply an S3 bucket policy that grants read access to the S3 bucket. B. Apply an IAM role to the Lambda function. Apply an IAM policy to the role to grant read access to the S3 bucket. C. Embed an access key and a secret key in the Lambda function's code to grant the required IAM permissions for read access to the S3 bucket. D. Apply an IAM role to the Lambda function. Apply an IAM policy to the role to grant read access to all S3 buckets in the account. The answer here is B. Apply an IAM role to the Lambda function. Apply an IAM policy to the role to grant read access to the S3 bucket. 50. A medical company needs to process approximately 12 terabytes of data. The laboratory requires sub-millisecond latencies and a maximum throughput of 6 gigabytes per second for the storage subsystem. Hundreds of Linux-based Amazon EC2 instances will distribute and process the data. Which solution will meet the performance requirements? A. Create an Amazon FSX for NetApp ONTAP file system. Set each volume's tiering policy to all. Import the raw data into the file system. Mount the file system on the EC2 instances. B. Create an Amazon S3 bucket to store the raw data. Create an Amazon FSX for Lustre file system that uses persistent SSD storage. Select the option to import data from and export data to Amazon S3. Mount the file system on the EC2 instances. C. Create an Amazon S3 bucket to store the raw data. Create an Amazon FSX for Lustre file system that uses persistent HDD storage. Select the option to import data from and export data to Amazon S3. Mount the file system on the EC2 instances. D. Create an Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP file system. Set each volume's tiering policy to none. Import the raw data into the file system. Mount the file system on the EC2 instances. The correct answer here would be B. Create an Amazon S3 bucket to store the raw data. Create an Amazon FSx for Lustre file system that uses persistent SSD storage. Select the option to import data from and export data to Amazon S3, then mount the file system on the EC2 instances. So that's a wrap for our practice questions for the AWS Solutions Architect Associate exam. If you found the practice questions helpful, please ensure that you like the video. It would mean a lot. And if you do have any questions about the practice questions in the video, please use the comments and ask questions. I'll do what I can to help, but really the in-depth explanations of the right and wrong answers will be in the practice exam bundle. I really feel it'll add a lot of value as you go ahead and study for the Solutions Architect exam. So don't forget to check that out at cloudvikings.io. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. I've been taking a bit of a break from making some videos lately. Just been busy with a bunch of things, but planning a lot of new content for the channel really soon. So be sure to subscribe and check out all the new stuff coming out. Thanks again for watching and see you in the next video.